And I'm the Marketing Communications Director at Madeira, USA. Our goal today is to communicate to you the range of metallic threads that Madeira has on the market and the differences of each. This seems like the perfect time of year when even those who might shy away from metallics are considering adding a snowflake here or a jingle bell there, so we're here to help. I'm joined by Nancy Minnie. She's our Senior Marketing Specialist, and Sarah Westfield, our Senior Graphics and Design Coordinator. Both of them are our resident embroiderers. These two ladies have mastered our full range of metallics and are ready to discuss examples and attributes and answer your online questions. We also have a guest participant, Rich Medcraft, who operates his embroidery company, Stitchwise, in Eagle Point, Oregon. Rich is on a product testing board for Madeira, and we often rely on his expertise. If you already include metallic embroidery thread in your inventory, you know how it can add visual accent and increase profit both at the same time. If you're toying with the idea of trying it, or have tried and not had good results, we'd like to share with you a few checkpoints that will ensure your success. And if your only knowledge of metallic threads is what you've heard from someone else, and it's enough to keep you from trying, we'd like to dispel those myths and remove your concerns. By the end of this webinar, as long as you stick with us through to the end, you will understand the options of all the metallics that Madeira has to offer. And there are 8 different families of metallics that we have here. You'll know which metallics are the best match for your purposes. Is ease of operation the most important thing to you? You want to focus on our FS50. Do you want to add a touch of metallic to an item that might be commercially laundered? If that's the case, pay careful attention to FS number 30. And if economics are a concern, then our new soft number 40 is your answer. You will learn the basic machine setup for ensuring excellent results. We will share all the tips and tricks that we've learned over the years, and you'll gain an understanding of the digitizing necessary for metallics. If you don't do your own digitizing, what should you tell your digitizer? You'll be able to run metallic threads competently for improving price points. Adding even just a touch of gold or silver to embroidered items creates perceived value that can increase your sales. And we'll be talking a little bit about how that can happen. Let's get started. Nancy will begin with an introduction of our best-selling metallic thread.
Good morning and good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. We're going to start today by looking at our more popular and easier to run metallic threads. Be sure to type in any questions that you may have in the question box and we'll answer as many as possible. Rest assured, if we don't get to your answer during the webinar, we'll be sending out all of our questions with the answers to the attendees by email later on. Starting with our FS50 metallic, this is the easiest of all metallic threads to run. Very often you can substitute it directly into a design that has been digitized via basic rayon and polyester 40-weight thread. There's no need to switch out your needles for an FS50. The 7511 large eye needle will work well with this thread. It's available in 8 different shades. There are 2 shades of silver and 6 shades of gold that give you plenty to choose from. Here are some examples of designs embroidered with FS50 metallic thread. This inexpensive pashmina scarf was enhanced by using stock designs in a the lighter shade of silver. The obvious and timely example of the snowflake design was created for a holiday card. Stitched out and on felt and trimmed, it can be inserted into a phototype card and it creates a beautifully personalized holiday card for family, friends, and coworkers. The gold crest on this design was stitched out in all FS50. This dragonfly design is a great example of blending FS50 with classic rayon 40. It was stitched out by Michael Savoya, who owns his own company, Villa Savoya, located in Providence, Rhode Island. Here he used a similar colored layer of classic rayon. It was used underneath as a base, underneath that metallic gold. This allowed the stitch count of the metallic to be reduced while producing a beautiful blended look with the rayon. Wall art and home decor combined with metallic threads are often not associated with embroidery other than with the high-end products, so consider using metallic when adding embroidery to a pillow or stitch outs worthy of framing. This design here has a mixture of FS50, Vermilana 12, and Super Twist 30. The silver FS50 on the outside of this design is a great example of the clarity of what can be achieved with FS50. If you're new to the industry or have been hesitant to try metallic thread before and are now interested, this is your go-to thread. When running FS Metallic 50, remember that you can still use your 7511 large eye needle. You can even use the smaller 65-9 needle as well. Be sure to reduce your machine speed and set the proper tension and pick out a design and give it a try. FS40 metallic thread is slightly thicker than that FS50. It's available in many different silvers and golds, and you can still stay with your standard 7511 large eye needle. Depending on the design, only slight adjustments may be needed with the digitizing. With the addition of some darker metallic colors, this metallic thread opens up a greater opportunity for designing. Notice that all four of these designs are mixed with classic rayon. When you consider trying metallic threads, mixing it with rayon or polyester will help reduce the need to redigitize. You may be able to slide it in as is. Both of these ornaments are mainly FS40, accented with classic rayon. Using a mixture of both can really make the metallic threads pop. Again, these are examples of designs used for holiday cards. Your options are wide when you consider the availability of both the pre-printed cards and the blank cards that you can customize yourself. Okay, here we go. So this fish design right here was digitized and stitched out by our Rich Medcraft, who's with us today. Rich, can you tell us about this design?
Sure. This design, much like the dragonfly, is again a blending or a layering is what I call it, a rayon thread, which is actually a yellow, 1061 Madeira yellow, and then I the FS gold 40 weight on top as a top layer. And the reason why I like to do that is it kind of gives it a little softer, more subtle glitter, which the metallic offers, and it's a terrific way to kind of dress up the design and give it a little more interest. The other thing I did was I used in the main body of the fish call a carved fill, and a lot of software out there has either pre-digitized pattern fills, or you can actually create your own pattern, so to speak, by putting lines in the fill, and then when the actual fill out occurs, the needle actually drops a stitch there, and you can actually see the pattern within the fill. In this case, I wanted to see or emulate the scales in the fish. So the body has that you can kind of see the more or less kind of diamond-shaped carved fill in it. So in addition to having the spectacular effect of the 40-weight thread, I also get the same kind of textured look of a real fish with the carved fill in the body.
Rich, a question. Sorry, Rich, a question that just came in is: Are you using the 40-weight and the metallic thread at the same time?
Yes, actually not sewn at the identical time. I think if that's the question. I have heard where some people will actually thread a single needle with two different threads at the same time and sew it. No. In this particular case, the fins sew first, and the first sequence in the fins was a rayon thread, again a yellow, 1061, and I did that on a real light fill. so it didn't have complete coverage. But then right away, I went back over it with the FS metallic using the same stitch direction, but again, a lighter fill, and so the combination of the two fills overlapping each other made for adequate coverage and also this kind of spectacular effect. But anyway, yeah, there's pretty much standard type digitizing techniques. A lot of people, as you reach with heavier metallic thread, and we're going to get into that later, as far as digitizing goes, you're probably going to require a lot less underlay. Underlay, as most people know, is used in two purposes. One is to stabilize the fabric you're sewing on, and the other is to actually provide a loft for the top stitches so that you get better coverage. Well, with metallic thread, this particular thread in this design is 40 weight and the 50 weight. You don't need to change anything. Those are pretty much standard digitizing techniques that you would use if you were digitizing for regular thread. But if you get into heavier weight metallic, then you can reduce the amount of underlay because you won't have the coverage issue. You still need to use underlay for stabilizing, but not for the coverage part. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think so. I have just one question here, Rich, that came in. One person asked, what is the best for a 30,000 stitch count for religious garments using a cross, faces of saints, etc.? So for metallics, using with a 30,000 stitch design, what would you recommend?
Well, that is quite a few stitches, and I guess a lot of it depends on the size of the design. If it's a pretty design, the larger the shape, if you will, I think I'd be more inclined to go with the heavier weight metallic because, again, it reduces the stitch count, but you gain in coverage. And you also have the room in a larger design to really show off the heavier weight metallic. What is beautiful about Madeira is that they offer the full spectrum of weight of metallic threads. So if you're doing a small design, like this little fish isn't very big, 40 and 50 weight work really well. Also, if you're doing small lettering, you know, you'd want to use the finer weight metallic because it'll show the letters a lot more crisply than like a heavyweight metallic. So it depends on the application and the size. If it's a large design, it would probably tend to go towards more, maybe a 35 weight or you know, one of the heavier, maybe even super twist metallics. But if you're using maybe something small and you're doing small lettering, then I would go with a lighter weight metallic like this 40 and 50 weight metallic.
Rich, another question that just came in from one of our guests. I know that you are a true fan of classic rayon, but the question is, can you substitute polyneon or polyester thread?
Absolutely. I love polyneon as well. I know I tout rayon because I think rayon, in some cases, I like the colors better. But in terms of runnability and certainly color selection, then polyneon is a perfect substitute or choice. So absolutely, I would not shy away from using either one of those kinds of thread. But certainly blending the two, I really like that concept of blending the rayon or poly neon with these new metallics.
Okay, thank you.
Last thing I might mention that's kind of a digitizing thing, but I think it's important for people to understand when they're doing metallics, and that is the stitch length. As you get into the heavier weight metallics, it's important to keep those stitch lengths a little bit longer than you might normally use. A lot of stitch lengths defaults in software is like 3 millimeter in length, and I really like to digitize my metallics in 3.5 on up to 4.5 millimeter length. So a little bit longer just makes them run a little better, and you don't need to have the shorter stitch length with metallics, because metallics I think will show off better with the longer stitch length.
Right. And when you're picking out those stock designs, you know, if you're not digitizing yourself and you're trying to find a design that would actually work well with metallic, you know, the more open area type designs very often will work well.
Right, and one tip that I heard that I think is an excellent one is if you're not a digitizer and yet you'd like to try one of these metallic threads, what you can do is take a stitch file, and in in your machine, enlarge it 10%, and then just go ahead and substitute the particular metallic that you want to try. Because effectively what you do when you're enlarging the stitch file in the machine is you're spreading the stitches apart. So in other words, you're decreasing the density. And that will allow you to run the metallics more successfully.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. I've tried that myself. All right. We just, the one last design there after the fish was this heart design with the sword. This is just a great example of mixing the rayon and the metallic as well, and it gives, you can just see some really beautifully shading and some good clarity that was achieved with these two together. So here are your basics for running that FS40 metallic. Again, you can stay with that 7511 large eye needle, balancing your tension. I saw somebody write in about balance. What does it mean to balance your tension, or how do you balance your tension? That 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule works with your metallics as well. So if you're stitching out a satin stitch on the underside of your garment that you're embroidering on, you should see 1/3 of the bobbin thread on the middle, and then 1/3 each on each side of that top thread coming down. So you want to maintain that same balance between your top tension, your top thread and your bottom thread. So that's what that means. We have a design that you can download online if you're having trouble balancing it, but mainly you're loosening the tension compared to your rayon and your polyester thread. So you want to balance that tension and be sure, another very important thing is to reduce the speed for all of your metallic threads. So if you find that you're experiencing thread breaks even after you're following the basics, try reducing that speed down an additional 50 stitches a minute and see if it helps. Starting with roughly a 600 to 700 stitches per minute is a good starting point when you're running with metallic. And then reduce it down from there as long as you got a nice fresh needle, and it's the proper needle, your tension set properly, and nothing else in the machine is hindering it. Try lowering your speed down. So that it really does need that. You've got to slow it down so it doesn't get too hot.
I have one other suggestion too. When you're running, particularly some of the heavier metallics, because of the nature of the thread, sometimes it's a good idea to put, I believe Madeira has what they call aster net, right? Is that how you pronounce it? And it's marvelous tool, and it's very inexpensive. You can buy them in a little kit. I think it's $3.50 or something like that. Anyway, you just slip that. It's like a little lightweight sock, and you just slip that over the cone of the thread. And what it effectively does is it just makes the thread come off the cone just a little bit smoother, and therefore you get running through your machine tensioners a little bit easier. And that can sometimes make a job run a lot easier, too.
It has, in my experience, sometimes especially in the wintertime when the air is really dry and there's a lot of static in the air, that thread, that metallic thread coming off that cone can kind of go a little bit erratic, and it can actually go to its next door neighbor and grab the thread with it, and before you know it, you're trying to pull 2 or 3 strands through the thread path, and that aster netting will help keep that thread a little calmer as well. So our last one of the 4 basics, the third one is our FS30. This is a specialized metallic thread. The twist construction of this thread consists of a double layer protection. This is the most abrasion-resistant metallic thread in the industry. It's been designed in order to withstand bleaching, stonewashing, commercial laundering. It's great for uniforms, linens, workwear, canvas, and even sporting goods. Take a look at these 2 butterfly designs. On the left is the original design stitched out using only FS30 on a cotton denim material. On the right is the same design that was bleached. While the denim clearly faded, the metallic thread held up to the bleach. The thickness of the FS30 metallic thread has the ability to create beautiful decorative scenes, like this one seen here. Used along with polyneon, polyester thread on a denim or twill jacket will allow this spider design to withstand any harsh laundering it may endure over the life of the garment. The availability of silvers, golds, and dark metallic colors allows this eagle design to be stitched out in all FS30, creating depth and clarity. So remember, FS30, if you're looking for a durable metallic thread, it is a thicker thread, so you will need to adjust your digitize and increase your needle size to a 90-14. As with all metallics, balance your tension and slow the machine down. Super Twist 30 is probably one of my personal favorites. The twist of this thread gives a truly sparkling glitter effect. It works well by itself and also in small doses. Notice the glitter look of the bodies of both the spider and the ant on these stitch outs. A bluish-white super twist was used on top of the pine cones and needles on this design to create a sparkling snow effect. Mainly Super Twist 30 was used for this ornament. The accent of classic rayon was used to add shading. In this design, a multicolored super twist was used underneath other types of thread, giving it a more subdued sparkle effect. Super Twist 30 is your thread of choice if you're looking for extra sparkle and shine. Being a thicker thread, you will need to use a larger needle. A 90-14 large eye needle works well. And again, be sure to slow that machine down and balance your tension properly.
This seems to be a good place to pause and take some of the questions that have been submitted. Rich, a question for you. Someone's asked if metallic thread can be used for fonts as small as 0.250.
For columns as narrow as 2.50?
For fonts, type style, lettering.
Oh, lettering. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It depends, obviously, on the particular metallic. I would use 50 and the 40 weight easily doing that. You can do some pretty narrow columns using that thread. It's very much similar to running regular thread. You don't have to change the digitizing or the densities, really, for either one of those. The 40 weight metallic, you might lighten the density some, but certainly not the 50 weight. It would do very well with the narrow columns like that.
Okay. Rich, are you familiar with a company called Applique Alley or one called Applique Market? Someone's asking if we're able to use metallics with those companies.
I'm not familiar with them, but if they're asking about combining metallic with applique, I don't know why not. Applique is a wonderful way to reduce stitch count and increase interest in designs, very much like metallics. Putting the two together would be an exceptional idea, I think.
Yes, I agree. One person asked if you have to use a special backing for when using metallics. It's my thought that you really just want to make sure you're using a soft metallic. A soft backing, just to kind of reduce any kind of fighting with the metallic. So a cutaway most likely would work best. Would you agree? Rich? We might have lost Rich, but he'll be back in. Another question is FS30 heavier than 40 and 50? The answer is yes. When it comes to weights of thread, the higher the number, the thinner the thread. So it's the opposite of what it appears. So a 30 weight thread, the FS30 is one of the thicker weight threads. And another question that came in, because we do have rayon with a lot of our in a lot of our designs, it asked if the colors are going to bleed when washing in the machine. Rayon and polyester both can have overdye in their thread, and that's the only time you would see bleeding. And normally you wouldn't even see it. Normally it just washes, and if there's a little bit of extra dye in there, it just washes out, and you would never see it.
So rayon is not particularly going to bleed and ruin garments. It's a color-fast thread that can withstand normal wear and tear. So it's the thread of choice within the industry, as you can see from Rich's opinion as well. A soft backing usually is a cutaway backing. Your tearaways have a more paper feel to them, so you might actually, when you're embroidering with metallic, one of your main things is reducing friction, and you don't want anything kind of rough going on it or next to it. So soft, when it comes to backings or stabilizers, are usually your cutaway backings. There are some soft tearaway backings, so if you do need something that needs to be torn away after the design has been embroidered, then there are some soft tearaway backings as well.
For those on the panel there, isn't there a side of embroidery after it's done to maybe offer additional protection?
Say that
like
again, Rich?
Well, isn't there a material like a backing material per se, but
for a tearaway backing?
The backing, it's something you would put on, you'd iron on in the back behind the embroidery after it's done.
Oh, yep. It's a finisher. The product that we have is called Easy Comfort Wear, and this is what you would see. Yep, it's what you would see actually on the back side of a lot of children's wear that they have for babies, because they have sensitive skins. And some of your high-end stores also have it on the backs of their embroidery. But it's also great for metallic. So if, say, you have the back side of your embroidery is rough because maybe you used a heavier metallic, or it's scratchy, using that coverall that goes on after after you finish embroidery, you cut it out slightly larger than the design, you apply it with a press or iron, and it has a nice soft feel to it. And it also gives it a nice finished look as well. Another question someone asked was, does rayon thread shrink? Rayon thread, rayon as in garments and thread, when it gets wet, it actually gets a little bit stiff, and then as soon as you dry it, it turns back to soft. So rayon is actually a real soft material. It's soft when embroidering as well, but when rayon gets wet, such as with washing, it will harden up. You'll feel it. If you've ever had a garment that you washed, you took it out and it's like, what is the matter with this thing? Then when you throw it in the dryer and pull it out, it magically turns soft again. So it doesn't shrink, but it does kind of get a little stiffer as it gets wet. One person asked which knob tightens the bobbin. A bobbin thread is actually tightened within the bobbin case. So you'd want to take a look at your manual, and that's going to show you where it's usually a small screw that it's very, you turn it very slightly to adjust the tension on your bobbin. Another thing to keep in mind, we have a needle chart that can be downloaded online. It tells you what needles to use for what threads. The other thing that we have available to download online is a digitizing chart, which gives you your basic digitizing density and your stitch length as well that are recommended for the different types of threads. So those do include your metallic threads as well. And they're available at madeiramart.com.
Okay, I'm going to stop us here just for two reasons. We mentioned that there are 8 families of metallic, and we've only reviewed 4 so far. Also, we are collecting all of your questions, every single one that's coming through. After the webinar is over, we will go over each question that was asked and create a complete list of questions and answers. We will send everybody that's in attendance today a link to those questions and answers for your future reference. At this point, I'd like to ask Nancy to please continue with a review of the next 4 families of Madeira metallics, including the newest member of the family. Nancy?
Okay, so FS45 has an aluminum coating rather than a pure silver, making it a more economical choice. It is slightly thicker than FS40, hence the 8012 or 9014 needle recommendation. With the availability of various golds, silvers, and jewel tones, a dramatic effect can be achieved with this. Our new soft metallic 40 consists of a soft rayon core, guaranteeing a smooth and gentle touch even in large fill areas. Pure silver coating gives a unique classic richness. A special finish on this thread allows for embroidering at high speeds. An 8012 or 9014 needle is recommended for best performance with this thread. FS35 is a good choice for decorative stitching. It fills in well and can be used with most any fabric. Using even the smallest amount in a design will add glitter and shine. FS20 is an elegant, soft metallic. It is another heavy thread that lends itself well to outlining and accent stitches. Due to its extra thickness, a 116 needle will be needed to run this thread. The colors are antique and retro in appearance.
Not long ago, in preparing for a trade show, Rich Medcraft provided us with some stitch-outs of corporate logos that illustrate how just a touch of metallic thread can really add a lot to a corporate logo. Here we have two examples that he gave us. And Rich, we're going to show the pairs of each one on the screen. Could you describe these for our guests?
Sure. The Sandar trucking logo, as you can see, the top version is all straight.
Rich, we're losing your contact.
Hello?
Yeah, there was a little break up there. Why don't you try again?
Okay. In this particular design, the top version is, of course, all classic rayon 40-weight thread. But I thought it might be interesting to see what it would do if I changed the lettering of Sandar into a 50-weight metallic, just to see what it would do. And as you can see, it offers a little bit extra character to the logo. And I do an awful lot of corporate embroidery, and I do a lot of corporate digitizing, logo digitizing for other embroiderers. And a lot of times, you know, what we're trying to do as embroiderers is separate ourselves from our competition. And maybe this particular company, I don't know who they are in particular because I did this design for another embroiderer, but it could very well be that they've had 3 or 4 embroiderers trying to attract their business, and you might be one of those in that competition. Well, if you go in with their logo done with just a little hint of this metallic done, like I did with the lettering Sandar, you know, that's going to separate you from your competition. And they're going to, you know, really be impressed with how yours looks so much sharper and unusual than the standard embroidery. So that's where metallic thread, particularly this 50-weight and 40-weight, work really well, because you don't need to change your digitizing. All you need to do is change the thread. And sometimes that can make a huge difference in how a logo looks. The same thing is true in the next design, which was done. It's a kind of a boring corporate logo. I don't think is nearly as interesting as Sandar, but nonetheless, I thought it would be kind of interesting to see what would happen if I changed the outer part of the world.
Hold on, folks.
Can you hear okay?
Yep, you're back.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, again, just simply changing the thread here from regular gray rayon thread to the metallic made this logo look a lot more interesting and appealing. And again, no changes in the digitizing. I just changed the thread and ran it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rich, another question that came in is about large monograms on sweatshirts or T-shirts of 8 inches in diameter, and they're asking which metallic you would recommend for that.
Well, again, I guess a lot of it depends on the element of the design. If it's really small, like we're still looking at this Cummins Griffin International logo. If we're talking about a narrow column like that border on the outside, then we could use a heavier weight metallic, but it's probably better suited with a lighter weight metallic. Well, the same thing goes true with your design you're talking about. If you've got a large area where it's a big area to fill, or maybe it's extremely large lettering, then by all means, I think using a heavier weight metallic would be the answer, because it does a couple things. One, I think it's a little more dramatic, and two, you need less stitches, because again, with a heavier weight metallic, you're going to lighten your density up about 10 to 20% as opposed to regular thread. So you're going to have fewer stitches, and you're also going to require less because you're going to get more coverage anyway. So it all depends on the shape of the design and the elements of the design. If they're nice, big, wide areas, then certainly I would go with the heavier weight metallic.
Okay. Another question from one of our guests is, do you have any tips on using metallics on baseball caps?
Well, I think as with any cap, particularly if it's a structured cap, you're going to need to use a sharp needle. And certainly going up in size in needle is important on a cap. And as we've indicated here, the heavier metallic, you're going to go up to even a size 14 or so needle, or even bigger. I guess 16 is the other size we were talking about, but there's a super twist we use that. But anyway, certainly a sharp needle is going to be important. Caps, as everybody probably knows, are a challenge in and of themselves, even with regular thread. And a lot of it depends on the quality of the digitizing, because caps require a little bit type of digitizing technique. Usually we do a design as a digitizer. We digitize a design for a cap to sew center out or bottom up as much as we can, because targets are kind of a moving target. They're very difficult to maintain registration. Well, the same thing is going to apply even if you're using metallic thread. So, you want to follow those same digitizing techniques. But I think probably more important than anything is that you use the right needle. And certainly a sharp needle for a cap and a bigger needle will greatly help the runability. I don't think it would matter really as far as production goes, using metallic versus regular. I think once you get your densities correct, you get your tension set correct, and you're using the right needles, you can run metallic in production without any trouble. Like I said, I've used this 40 and 50 weight thread without any changes at all, and it runs beautifully and smoothly, and even the tensioning is very similar, believe it or not, to regular rayon thread. The heavier metallics, you definitely need to lighten the density or lighten your tension some, because they don't require the tensions that are normal rayon or poly-neon thread do.
One of the things, another thing, what we have available, I'm trying to say, is you can also switch from a large eye to a standard eye needle. So if your needle's actually breaking, going to a standard eye larger needle, your 80 or 90, can strengthen that needle a little bit. So you're not going to get the needle breaks from the deflection.
Yes, and there's also needles that you can try that are a little bit tougher. They're
titanium.
Titanium, correct.
Yeah. So they're a little stronger, so they'll hold up a little better,
right,
especially going over that seam.
Most of the problem that people have with caps is something called flagging, and what that means is that the top, the center of the cap tends to bounce up and down to the needle plate, and if that happens, you're more apt to get what they call deflection of the needle. When that happens, the needle doesn't actually go down through the hole of the needle plate. It actually will tend to get deflected and hit the top of the needle plate, and then you get a break. Well, a lot of this can be alleviated just simply in the digitizing. A lot of it is a matter of just, again, digitizing from the center out so that you eliminate that flagging right off the bat, and then you don't have any problems.
Yeah.
Rich, another question, this one from a guest who is obviously preparing for Halloween. The question is, I have to create a 12-inch long capital S on the back of a cape, and then corrected that. I actually have to do 12 capes with a big S on the back. And they're asking for recommendations based on the metallics that you have used in the past.
Well, a big shape like that, certainly you could go with one of the heavier metallics that is offered. I think the key is going to be, again, digitizing. Stitch direction on, particularly if it's a knit, and I'm assuming it's probably going to be a knit, I would avoid anything that is at a sharp angle because you will cause that material to distort. So be sure and go as much horizontal as you can, in other words, opposite to the grain of the material, and use proper underlay to stabilize it. And I think it'll be just fine. You can use the 35 weight metallics easily.
And here's another question that I think several people are curious about, because we mentioned that with the use of metallic threads, even introducing just a little bit into the work that you're preparing for customers, it's going to have an effect on your price point, and that it enables you to charge more for an item. Could you talk a little bit about pricing and how the addition of metallic affects your pricing for your customers?
Sure. I think as with anything, and then let's just start off with, let's compare screen printing with embroidery. You know, we're all embroiderers here, so obviously we're selling embroidery over screen printing, and the first thing I always say is the perceived value, which is the key term there, perceived value, is much greater with embroidery. So therefore, we can charge more than a screen printer in a sense, and the consumer, or person that's buying it, will likely pay more for it. Well, the same concept holds true, I think, in using a metallic thread. Again, the perceived value goes way up. So therefore, you can charge a little more. Now, how much? That depends on your market, and it depends on your customer and your competition and a lot of things. I mean, in some markets, I see people charging a lot more than I can charge, perhaps here in my local market. It really is a matter of the individual area. But again, I think you could charge as much as 20% more, perhaps. Embroiderers charge differently. Some charge by stitch count. Some charge by just a flat rate. So it really depends on what your individual costs are. Certainly you want to factor in your costs because metallic thread is not as economical, say, or price-friendly, so to speak, as perhaps rayon or polyneon, but of course it's pretty special thread, and it takes quite a bit more to produce it, to manufacture it. So therefore it costs more. Well, those costs need to be reflected in what you get paid for the end product that you get through embroidering. So I would definitely increase your prices, and depending upon what the market will bear, I guess will determine how much you increase it. But certainly, yes, you can increase the price for what you charge. Another comparison might be, again, applique. Applique, again, the beauty of that is it cuts down on stitch count, so therefore less machine time. But there's the added step in creating the shape and putting it in place, and so there's a little more production in it. But the overall price of applique is usually more, again, because it's not so much anything other than the fact that the perceived value is much greater. So you can charge more. People are more willing to pay more for something that they perceive has a higher value.
Great. Thanks, Rich. I'm going to take a couple of questions here. One person asked, would you recommend wash-away stabilizer? Keep in mind with a wash-away stabilizer, it is what it is, meaning that it washes away. So as with any design, if when that wash-away backing washes away, the design in the fabric needs to be able to support it. So that holds true for your metallic thread as well. You want to make sure that the design itself in the fabric can hold up after the backing's gone. If that's not true, you'd want to stick with your cutaway backing. I think this may be in regards to a home sewing machine, because very often this is with your flat-sided needles, you have metallic needles and you have embroidery needles. So somebody's asking what's the difference between them. Generally, the difference between them on a home market is it's just the size of the needle. So you go up to a heavier needle for your metallic thread. Home machines can give a little bit of a trouble with the metallic threads, and it's usually related to the needle. So you just want to make sure that you're using a large enough eye needle to reduce that friction. Again, slow the machine down. Usually your home machines go fairly slow, but it's not used to running that thread, so slow it down a little more. Somebody's asking what the size of the bobbin threads to use with metallics. You can use your regular embroidery bobbin thread along with metallic. Let's see. What is considered a heavyweight metallic thread? I mentioned this a little bit before. The way the numbers work on all embroidery threads, the higher the number, the thinner the thread. So your heavier weight metallics would be your 30 weight, your FS30, your FS35, FS20. Your lighter weights are your FS50 and 40. Think of your 50 weight as equal to your 40 weight in your rayon and polyester. That's why you can very often substitute that in. And another question on bobbin thread, does it have to be the same as the top thread? No, you'd want to use, when you're embroidering, you want to make sure that you're using embroidery bobbin thread. Generally it's thinner than your top thread.
A few questions that were written in earlier when Rich was talking about his goldfish design involve rayon and polyester. Question was, does the industry truly prefer rayon thread? And the customer was saying that they're getting conflicting information about which is preferable. It very much depends on your finished product and the end result of what you're going for. If you are embroidering something that is going to be placed into commercial laundry and the embroidery will be subject to bleach, that's the one time that you would want to stick with polyester regardless. But I would encourage people to visit a new blog that we just put up. It's called MadeiraMatters.net. And we have Arnie Corfine kind of dressed up as Professor T.H. Reed. The last blog that he did, the one that's up now, is about choosing rayon versus polyester. And he makes a lot of good points that he's gathered over years and years of experience in the industry. And that site, again, is Madeira Matters, MATTERS.net, MadeiraMatters.net, to catch up on our blog and see rayon versus polyester.
You can also find a link to our blog at the bottom of our website, along with our Facebook and Twitter feeds.
Okay, I think we're going to go from our questions here, and I'm going to ask Nancy to kind of summarize where we are now, and we'll see at the end if we have any time for questions. But right now, here's a little summary of where we ended up.
Okay, so we hope that we've dispelled the myths that you may have heard over time or experienced yourself without the proper knowledge. Like in most friendships, friction is not a good thing. In order to get your machine to get along with your metallic threads, that friction must be reduced. So here's how to do that. You want to make sure that you're using the correct needle. We have a needle chart available to download at MadeiraMart.com. You want to set that tension properly. I talked about the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule. I'll just reiterate, emphasize that again, what that's about. So say you're doing the letter I in a satin stitch. If you look at the back side of that, you should be seeing 1/3 of the bobbin thread in the middle, running straight down the middle. And then on the outside, you're going to have the top thread showing for the other 2/3, so 1/3 on both sides. Always make sure that you reduce the machine speed. Still having trouble, make sure you try reducing at 50 stitches a minute. It can make a huge difference in how these threads run. Digitizing is important for most of the metallic threads, but remember that FS 50 weight and sometimes 40 weight can be substituted in many of the stock designs without making adjustments to the design or changing the needle. Also available online to download is that digitizing chart. So if you're doing your own digitizing or you're sending it out and you want to use metallic, there's a chart that gives you the basics for stitch length and density. So that's a chart that's available online as well down at the bottom of the page.
In case you've been wondering about the availability of the designs that we've shown you throughout this webinar, we just wanted to let you know which designs are available for you to use at no charge. Some of the designs that we've been sharing with you, we borrowed for illustrative purposes only, and others, like the ones that are pictured here, are available for you to try. These have been digitized specifically to run real well with our metallic threads. There's no charge for them, and you'll find them on our website under the Services tab at Madeira USA. At this point, we'd like to thank you very much for attending Mastering Metallics with Madeira. To thank you, we will be sending out an email that will offer you special pricing on the metallic threads that you'd like to try. And again, for any who did not get their questions answered, we will be sending out the complete list of questions and all the answers for you to refer to in your own shop. In that same email, we will include a link to a complete needle chart, and that will match up the correct needle choices that we believe will work best with our thread, and also a link to a digitizing chart, which will specify the density settings we've recommended for you, or to your digitizer. We hope, as Nancy mentioned, that we've dispelled some of the fears and encouraged you to add some sparkle to the season and to your embroidery with Madeira's metallic embroidery thread. Thank you for your time.